She just did something that might have ended this entire labor war before it even started, and almost nobody is talking about it the right way. While the WNBA union is threatening to cancel the 2026 season, while leaked letters are flying around the league office, while agents are quietly panicking about paychecks that might never come, Caitlin Clark packed a bag, walked into a Team USA gym, laughed with her teammates, drilled a game winner in a scrimmage, and reminded every single owner in that league exactly who actually holds the leverage. No statement, no subtweet, no press conference, just one calm, calculated move that exposed the union's entire strategy as a bluff nobody can actually afford to call. Stay with me, because by the time this is over, you're going to understand exactly why the WNBA needs her infinitely more than she will ever need the WNBA, and why this labor standoff might already be decided even though nobody has admitted it out loud yet. Let's start with the cold truth about professional sports, because it's the only lens that actually explains what's happening right now. This isn't a sisterhood. It was never a sisterhood, no matter how many times that word gets used in a press conference. It is a business, and in business you are worth exactly what you generate, nothing more, nothing less. You are either the engine pulling everyone else forward, or you are riding in the back seat depending on someone else to get you to the destination. For roughly a quarter century, the WNBA as a whole was riding in that back seat. It lost money year after year. It survived because the NBA quietly propped it up financially, covering the gap so the league could keep the lights on and keep paying salaries. That is not an opinion. That is a documented financial reality that league executives themselves have acknowledged for years. And yet, inside that same struggling league, a group of veteran players built up an identity as untouchable global icons, carrying themselves as if the money, the sponsorships, and the mainstream attention were already flowing in before anyone with real national drawing power had ever stepped foot on the floor. Then everything changed. Caitlin Clark arrived. She didn't just perform well in her rookie season. She shattered viewership records that had stood untouched for decades. Ticket prices for her road games multiplied several times almost overnight. Merchandise featuring her name sold out within minutes of release. Television ratings for her games dwarfed anything the league had produced in its entire history, including finals broadcasts from previous years. Networks that had barely bothered airing WNBA games on their main channels suddenly wanted primetime windows and were willing to pay for them. A media rights deal that used to be treated as an afterthought in league finances ballooned into a contract worth well over $2 billion. In one single season, she didn't just help the league, she rewrote its entire financial trajectory, and every serious sports business analyst covering the league has said some version of the same thing. And instead of the veteran establishment recognizing what had just walked through the door and adjusting accordingly, a faction of them responded with something closer to resentment. Not gratitude, resentment. You could see it in the physical play directed at her during her rookie year, the flagrant fouls that somehow kept getting downgraded on review, the pointed comments in interviews, the subtle exclusion in certain locker room dynamics that reporters covering the team quietly noted. That resentment has now curdled into what the league is officially calling a labor negotiation, but what increasingly looks, from the outside, like a slow-motion act of institutional self-sabotage. The Players Association is threatening to blow up the entire 2026 season over a set of demands that includes guaranteed maximum contracts across the board, fully covered housing for every player regardless of market size, and something close to half of the league's total revenue split directly with the players. Now, to be fair, some of those asks are not unreasonable in a vacuum. Plenty of professional leagues around the world operate on revenue splits close to 50%, and player advocacy for better working conditions is a completely legitimate goal in any industry. The problem isn't necessarily the demands themselves sitting on paper. The problem is the story the union is trying to sell alongside those demands. The story that every single new fan who showed up over the last 2 years is loyal to the union's broader cause rather than loyal to the specific player who actually brought them into the arena in the first place. And that particular story just collapsed in the most public way imaginable, right in front of everyone's phone screens. Because while the union leadership was busy drafting ultimatums and coordinating messaging campaigns, Caitlin Clark walked straight past the entire fight without engaging in a single exchange. She reported to Team USA training camp on schedule. No commentary on the labor dispute whatsoever. No shots fired at anyone in the union, no subtle jabs, no cryptic social media posts for people to dissect. She simply showed up, put her shoes on, and got to work on the biggest international stage the sport currently has to offer her. And that single quiet decision might end up being one of the smartest, most quietly devastating moves anyone connected to this entire situation has made in years, precisely because it required her to say absolutely nothing at all. Look at the footage coming out of that gym, because honestly it tells the entire story without a single word of narration needed over it. Players laughing between drills, joking around like normal young athletes do. Coaches barking out plays, keeping the pace moving. Someone yelling, USA on 3, like a group of kids who are just genuinely happy to be playing basketball together on the same team for once, without the weight of an ongoing labor dispute hanging over every interaction. Angel Reese knocking down shot after shot in a shooting drill. Paige Buchers yelling instructions across the court, fully locked into the moment. And right in the middle of all of it, Clark, relaxed, smiling, completely detached from whatever chaos is unfolding back home in the WNBA offices. Then comes the moment everyone ended up talking about days later. Clark drills a contested game winner in an internal scrimmage. The gym erupts. Teammates are hyping her up, jumping around, genuinely excited for her. And within a matter of hours, that clip is everywhere, shared across platforms, replayed in slow motion, dissected frame by fans and analysts alike. That 15-second highlight does more for her personal brand, and by extension for whichever league eventually gets to claim her talents on a full-time basis, than 100 carefully worded press releases from the union combined ever could. Now hold that image next to the mood radiating out of the actual labor dispute happening simultaneously. Anonymous letters leaking to major sports outlets. Players venting frustration online in increasingly pointed language. League officials bracing internally for a potential work stoppage that could wipe out an entire season of momentum. Whatever the union's real underlying intentions are, and there are legitimate concerns buried in there about pay equity, travel conditions, and player treatment that deserve to be taken seriously, the optics playing out publicly right now are genuinely brutal for their side of the narrative. On one side, you have a young star radiating pure, unforced joy on the biggest stage in the sport. On the other side, you have a negotiation that looks, from the outside, like a slow, burning house fire with no clear end in sight. And in an industry built entirely on television ratings, sponsorship dollars, and public perception, optics function as real, tangible currency whether the Players Association wants to admit that fact publicly or not. Here's the part that should genuinely worry union leadership at a strategic level, because this isn't just about vibes or short-term public perception. It's about hard, cold numbers, and those numbers have already been tested in the real world under actual market conditions. Remember Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 off-season league, a group of established veterans built specifically to prove they could draw a national television audience without Clark on the floor at all. It launched with real financial backing from serious investors, real television partners, including a major national network, and genuine ambition to demonstrate that star power in women's basketball didn't begin and end with one point guard from Iowa. The ratings told an entirely different story than what the organizers had hoped for. Viewership came in at a fraction of what the WNBA regular season pulled during Clark's rookie year, even accounting for the different formats and time slots. Network executives who invested heavily in the concept were left scrambling to explain disappointing numbers to their own bosses and shareholders. And when one of the league's most promising young stars suffered a serious injury during a relatively low-stakes exhibition game, it became a painful, very public symbol of how much was risked physically and financially for how little actual return on investment. The experiment was designed to prove independence from Clark's individual drawing power. Instead, it ended up proving almost the exact opposite conclusion. Without her presence on the floor, national television audiences changed the channel in significant numbers, and that is not a comfortable thing for a labor union to have discovered about its own broader membership right before walking into a high-stakes negotiation. Now flip that entire equation around and look at what happens every single time Clark actually plays, in any context, at any level. Ratings spike almost instantly and measurably. broadcast partners actively compete over which windows get to air her games. A single viral clip, whether it's a logo three-pointer or a clutch game winner in a scrimmage, generates more national attention within 24 hours than most other storylines in the entire league generate across a full month of coverage. That is not a coincidence, and every owner, every league executive, every network programmer watching the Team USA footage right now understands it intuitively in their bones, because they've watched the numbers firsthand for 2 straight years. When people like Adam Silver, Kathy Engelbert, and the various ownership groups across the league look at Clark hitting a game winner in a scrimmage and watch it go viral within a matter of hours, they are not simply seeing a talented young basketball player having a good moment. They are seeing the single biggest driver behind that multi-billion-dollar media rights deal operating completely outside the reach and jurisdiction of the current labor dispute entirely. If the union actually follows through and pulls the trigger on a full work stoppage, the owners are not the party that loses the most leverage in that particular scenario, no matter how the union frames it publicly. Clark loses essentially nothing of substance. She's already playing on a global stage right now. She's already generating headlines independent of the WNBA news cycle. She's already building her personal international brand, fully insulated from whatever consequences unfold with the WNBA season back home. And that is the real nightmare scenario, quietly keeping the veteran leadership up at night as they push this fight forward. If the 2026 season gets delayed or canceled outright, the vast majority of players lose paychecks they were counting on to cover rent, training expenses, and off-season plans. They lose momentum they've spent years carefully building for their individual brands. They lose relevance in a media cycle that moves faster than ever and rarely looks backward with sympathy. Clark loses almost none of that in comparison. Her audience simply follows her directly to the international qualifiers, broadcast by the same network partners who are already deeply invested in her personal popularity and eager to keep building future programming around her regardless of what happens domestically. She does not fundamentally need the WNBA's platform to remain the most talked about player in the sport globally. The WNBA, on the other hand, absolutely needs her audience and her drawing power to justify the sheer size of that media deal to their own broadcast partners and advertisers going forward. That fundamental imbalance is the entire ballgame here, and no amount of carefully crafted union messaging changes the underlying financial math sitting underneath it. So the real question worth asking becomes this: why push toward a full lockout at all, especially when so many rank-and-file players, the ones actually waiting on their contracts to get signed, actually needing that paycheck to make rent next month, are reportedly begging behind the scenes for a deal to get finalized quickly? The uncomfortable answer that a lot of mainstream sports coverage seems hesitant to say directly on camera is that for at least a segment of the veteran class driving this fight, the dispute was never purely about the money sitting on the negotiating table. It's about control of the culture and the hierarchy that existed before she arrived. For years, a small group of established stars shaped how this league operated on a day-to-day basis. They set the unwritten locker room hierarchy. They shaped the media narratives through their relationships with beat reporters. They expected a certain level of deference from younger players coming up through the college and draft pipeline. Then a 22-year-old from Iowa walked in, shattered every viewership record on the books within a matter of months, signed 9-figure endorsement deals with major global brands, and completely rewrote the league's financial trajectory without asking permission from anyone in that existing hierarchy. For veterans who spent a full decade grinding to build the foundation of a genuinely struggling league, watching one rookie become the undisputed face of its sudden financial windfall is, understandably on a human level, a difficult pill to swallow emotionally. But hurt feelings, however understandable from a human perspective, don't ultimately change market reality. And using a lockout as a blunt tool to slow down the one player driving unprecedented growth for the entire league isn't a coherent negotiating strategy. It's closer to self-sabotage dressed up in the language of collective solidarity. What makes this entire situation even more damaging for the union's public position is how Clark has chosen to respond to all of it, because she hasn't really responded at all in the confrontational way a lot of people expected or maybe even wanted for the sake of drama. Listen closely to how she talked about making the Team USA roster in her own words during that press availability. She called it something she had written down as a personal dream back in 3rd grade, long before any of this attention existed. She talked at length about respecting the long journey it takes any player to reach this particular level of competition. She specifically acknowledged the players who came up alongside her on junior national teams over the years, including the ones who didn't end up making this particular senior roster. No shots at the union anywhere in that answer. No commentary on the ongoing labor situation whatsoever, even when reporters clearly wanted her to engage with it. Just quiet, grounded, almost old-fashioned professionalism delivered on the biggest stage currently available to her. That kind of measured response makes it nearly impossible for anyone to successfully paint her as the entitled villain in this broader story. And it makes the contrast with the increasingly bitter public tone coming out of the labor dispute even sharper for casual fans watching from the outside without deep context. If the Players Association actually follows through and forces a full work stoppage in the coming weeks, they are not walking into a fight they are guaranteed to win, and they are not walking into it without real, substantial risk to their own long-term position. Best case scenario for the union. They force genuine, meaningful concessions out of ownership and prove definitively that the players can hold the line together as a fully unified group, which would honestly be a real and impressive accomplishment worth respecting regardless of how you feel about the individual demands. Worst case scenario. And this is the outcome a lot of agents and rank-and-file players are reportedly quite worried about behind closed doors. They alienate the exact fan base that made this entire negotiations leverage possible in the first place. They hand ownership every justification it needs to reset the league's financial structure on terms far less favorable to players over the long term. And they watch the one player who could have been their single biggest asset in this fight simply continue building her career on the international stage without them, largely unaffected by the outcome either way. Either path this goes down, when the dust eventually settles on this particular dispute, Clark is very likely still going to be the single biggest individual draw the sport has ever produced at any level. The real open question isn't really about her personal future at this point. It's about whether the WNBA as an institution figures out how to build a genuinely sustainable structure around that reality moving forward, or whether internal politics and old resentments end up burning down the best commercial opportunity women's basketball has arguably ever been handed in its entire history. So here's what I actually want to know from you watching this right now, because this is exactly the kind of story where the comment section usually ends up more interesting than the video itself. Do you think this lockout threat is genuinely rooted in securing fair pay and better conditions across the entire league for every player? Or do you think it's really about a handful of established veterans trying to slow down a rookie who changed the entire business landscape almost overnight without their permission? Do you think ownership actually caves and meets the union's full demands under sustained public pressure? Or do they call the bluff entirely knowing full well that Clark isn't going anywhere regardless of how this particular negotiation shakes out? And realistically, how massive do you think the ratings end up being for her international debut with Team USA, while all of this drama continues playing out simultaneously back home in the WNBA? Drop your honest, unfiltered take down in the comments below, because this story is only getting louder from here, not quieter, and the next few weeks are genuinely going to reveal a lot about who actually holds real power in this league going forward into the future.